The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of our small apartment in Rawalpindi, the same light that had greeted me for 32 years of mornings before retirement. I was 63, officially a pensioner for 7 months now, and still not used to the quiet. The house felt too large without the daily rush to the office, without the sound of my daughter's quick footsteps when she used to live here. Aisha had moved out 3 years ago after her marriage to Bilal, a quiet software engineer who worked for an American company remotely. They lived in a modest flat in Baria Town Phase 8. We met every other Sunday for lunch, me cooking keema and she bringing the dessert. Routine, comfortable, safe. Until last Tuesday, she called at 7:14 a.m. Her voice was different, too bright, too fast. Papa, can I come over? It's important. Of course, beta. Everything okay? Everything is perfect. I'll be there in 40 minutes. When she arrived, her cheeks were flushed, eyes shining in a way I hadn't seen since she was 15 and got first position in board exams. She hugged me longer than usual, the scent of her rose attar wrapping around me like old memories. Papa, we got the visas. Visas? For what? Canada. Tourist visas. For me, Bilal, and little Zane. We're going in April. Niagara Falls, Banff, Vancouver, the whole dream trip. I smiled, genuinely happy for a moment. That's wonderful, beta. How long have you been planning this? 6 months. But the best part, she paused, reached into her handbag, and pulled out a familiar navy blue envelope. My heart gave a small, uncomfortable thud. It was the envelope where I kept the pension papers, the fixed deposit receipts, and the monthly bank statements I printed religiously every quarter. I needed to book the tickets quickly. The fares were increasing every day. There was this limited offer on Emirates. Seats were disappearing. So I transferred some money from your account. The room became very still. Even the ceiling fan seemed to slow down. How much? My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. She looked down at the carpet, tracing the faded pattern with her eyes. 4,80,000 rupees. Almost 5 months of my pension. Everything I had managed to save in the last year after paying the house rent, my blood pressure medicines, Zane's school fee contribution, and the small amount I kept aside for the gas cylinder. Papa, I know it looks terrible. But please listen, Bilal's parents are paying for their share, and my SAS gave us 2 lakh as advance ED. We will return every single rupee. By next year, latest. I promise on Ami's grave. I sat down slowly on the old sofa. The springs groaned under my weight, the same way they had groaned when I first bought this set in 1998 with my first big increment. You took it without asking. I was going to ask. I swear, but the offer was ending in 2 hours. And you always say family comes first. This is for Zane too, Papa. He is 4.5. He will see snow for the first time. Real mountains. Glaciers. He will remember this forever. When I was small, you took me to Murray once. I still remember the smell of pine trees. I want that for him. I looked at the photograph on the wall, Aisha, 8 years old, standing between me and her mother on that Murray trip. The last holiday we ever took as a complete family. Ami passed 9 months later from a sudden brain hemorrhage. Papa, please don't be angry. I did it for the memories. For the 3 of us. I didn't speak for a long time. The fan rotated slowly above us, making small shadows dance on the wall like hesitant ghosts. Finally I asked the only question that seemed to matter in that moment. When are you leaving? April 12th. Returning. April 26th. I nodded once. Then you should go. Her eyes filled with tears, relief and guilt mixed together. You'll get the money back. I swear on everything. I know. She stayed another hour, talking about itineraries, showing me photos of Lake Louise on her phone, telling me how Zane had already started packing his small red suitcase. I listened. I nodded. I even smiled twice. When she left, she kissed my forehead the way she used to when she was little. Thank you, Papa. You won't regret this. The door closed softly behind her. I sat alone till evening, the navy blue envelope still in my lap like an accusation. That night I opened my banking app for the first time in weeks. Balance, 142,780 rupees. Enough for the next 3 months if I was very careful. After that, I would have to ask my younger brother in Lahore for help. The thought tasted like rust in my mouth. Yet somewhere deep inside, a small, stubborn part of me was not angry. Not entirely. Because I remembered how, when Aisha was 6, she had secretly taken my entire month's salary from the steel almari to buy me a surprise wristwatch for Eid. The watch was cheap, plastic, and stopped working after 2 months. She had cried for 3 days when she realized I couldn't buy groceries that week. I had held her and told her it was okay. That love was worth more than money. That family was the only real wealth. Now, 25 years later, she was doing the same thing. Only this time the price was much higher. And I wasn't sure anymore if I still believed those words. The house felt colder after Aisha left. Not because the January wind was slipping through the cracked window frames, but because the laughter had gone with her. The small dining table, once crowded with her college books and half-eaten plates of paratha, now held only my untouched cup of evening chai and the pension slip that arrived 3 days ago, already torn at one corner from where her manicured fingers had impatiently pulled it from the envelope. I had said nothing when she asked. I had smiled, weakly, the way old men learn to smile when they understand refusal will only bring guilt and louder arguments. I told myself it was only once. I told myself daughters dream bigger than fathers ever did. I told myself that watching her eyes light up when she talked about, just 5 days in Dubai with her friends, was worth more than the money I would never see again. I was wrong. The first week she was gone, I kept the television louder than necessary. News channels, cooking shows, even the afternoon soap operas I never used to watch, anything to fill the silence that had teeth. At night I sat on the same sofa where she used to curl up and complain about professors, fees, hostile food. Now the cushion still remembered the shape of her body, but the warmth had left. On the 8th day, the bank sent the SMS. Account balance, 18,742 Pakistani rupees. That was all that remained after the ticket, the visa, the shopping she had to do for the trip, the extra money she took, just in case. 18,742 rupees. Enough perhaps for another month of medicine, electricity, and the gas cylinder I had been postponing. I stared at the message until the screen went dark, then sat in the dark for another hour. People say pride is a luxury old men cannot afford. They are right, but shame is free, and it arrives whether you invite it or not. When Aisha returned, she came with gifts. A bottle of perfume I would never use, a keychain with a tiny Burj Khalifa, a box of dates wrapped in gold foil. She hugged me tightly, smelling of airport, new clothes, and foreign shampoo. Papa, you should have seen it. It was magical. I nodded. I said, I'm happy for you, beta. She didn't notice the way my voice cracked on the last word. She didn't notice how my hand trembled when I accepted the dates. She didn't notice that the sofa now had a permanent depression on my side only. Later that night, after she went to sleep, I opened the steel almirah. At the bottom, behind the folded winter shawls, was the small cloth pouch where I had kept the emergency money for years, money I never told anyone about, not even her mother when she was alive. There were 3 notes of 500 and 1 of 200 left. I counted them twice, as if the numbers might change if I believed hard enough. They didn't. I closed the pouch, closed the almirah, and sat on the floor with my back against the cold metal door. For the first time in 38 years, I allowed myself to cry the way a man cries when no one is watching, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a leaking tap that has finally given up pretending it can hold water. I cried for the man I used to be, the one who thought providing meant everything would be all right. I cried for the daughter who still believes love is measured in trips and photographs. I cried for the pension that was never meant to be a ticket out of someone else's life. And most of all, I cried because I knew, deep in the marrow of my tired bones, that I would do it again. If she asked tomorrow, I would hand over the last notes. If she smiled the way she smiled when she showed me the pictures of the desert safari, I would lie again and say I was fine. Because that is what fathers do when the world has taught them that. Their own dreams ended the day their child's began. We become bridges. We become silences. We become the last few rupees in a torn envelope. And we pray, quietly, desperately, that one day our children will look back and understand that the most expensive things we ever gave them were never the things we paid for. They were the pieces of ourselves we never asked to be returned. Months passed like pages turned too quickly. Aisha returned to university life with the kind of energy that only comes from having tasted something larger than the street where you grew up. Her Instagram stories filled with cafe check-ins, late-night study group selfies, new sneakers, a rose gold watch I had never seen before. Each post arrived like a small, polite invoice I could never pay. I stopped checking the bank balance every morning. What was the point? The number no longer surprised me, it only confirmed what I already knew. One rainy April afternoon she came home earlier than usual. The power was out. Again, so the house sat in the heavy, damp quiet broken only by the drumming on the tin roof. She dropped her bag by the door, kicked off her wet shoes, and stood in the middle of the drawing room looking at me as if seeing me for the first time in years. "Papa, why didn't you tell me?" Her voice was small, not angry, not accusing, just small. I looked up from the newspaper I hadn't really been reading. "Tell you what, Beta. That things are this tight." She gestured vaguely around the room, at the peeling paint near the ceiling, the old fan that wobbled on its axis, the single bulb hanging naked without a shade. I saw the medicine receipts on the table. And the electricity bill you've been hiding under the Quran. I wasn't snooping, I swear. It just fell out. I folded the newspaper slowly. Each crease felt like another year folding in on itself. "I didn't want you to worry," I said. The oldest, most tired sentence in every father's dictionary. She came and sat on the arm of the sofa beside me. Close enough that I could smell the rain on her hair and the faint vanilla of whatever new perfume she was wearing. "I thought the pension was enough," she whispered. I thought you were okay. That you were just being careful, the way you always are." I looked at her then, really looked. The girl who used to cry when the kite string broke. The teenager who fought with me over curfew. The young woman who now stood taller than her mother ever did. And somewhere in her eyes I saw the first real crack of guilt. "I am okay," I lied softly. Then, because the lie tasted worse than usual, I added, "I will manage." She shook her head. A tear slipped and she didn't wipe it away. "You always manage. That's the problem. You manage so well that everyone forgets you're the one carrying everything." Silence settled between us, thicker than the humidity. After a long while she spoke again, voice trembling but determined. "I'm going to start giving tuitions. Starting next month. And I've already talked to the department head about a research assistant position. They pay better than you think. I'm not taking any more money from you. Not for trips. Not for clothes. Not for anything." I opened my mouth to protest. Old habit, but she raised her hand gently. "No, Papa, let me finish. I'm not doing this because I feel sorry for you. I'm doing it because I finally understand what it costs to love someone the way you love me. And I'm ashamed it took me this long." She reached into her bag and pulled out a thin envelope. Inside were 5 crisp 5,000 rupee notes. "This is the first installment," she said. "I sold the watch. And some other things I didn't really need. It's not much, but it's a start. For your medicines. For the gas. For whatever you need." I stared at the money in my lap like it was a foreign object. "Aisha, please," she said, and her voice broke completely now. "Let me give something back. Just this once. Let me feel like I'm not only taking." I didn't argue. I couldn't. Instead I pulled her into my arms the way I used to when she was 5 and the world was too big. She cried against my shoulder, quiet, adult. Sobs that hurt more than any childhood tears ever could. I stroked her hair and let my own tears fall into it, mixing with the rain smell and the vanilla. We stayed like that until the power came back on with a sudden click, flooding the room with harsh yellow light. She pulled back, wiped her face with the sleeve of her kurta, and gave me the smallest, most fragile smile. "I'm not going anywhere, Papa. Not really. I promise I'll stay close enough that you never have to choose between my dreams and your medicines again." I nodded, throat too tight for words. Later that night, after she had gone to her room, I opened the steel almirah again. I took out the little cloth pouch. Counted the 3 500s and the single 200 one last time. Then I placed Aisha's envelope beside it. For the first time in years the small pile looked like enough. Not because the amount had changed, but because it was no longer only mine too. Part 4. The Slow Return. The summer of 2025 came and went like a long, quiet exhale. Aisha kept her word, not in grand gestures. There were no sudden windfalls, no overnight miracles, but in the small, stubborn way life actually changes, one decision at a time. She taught 3 tuitions a week after college. Advanced English to O-level students, economics to first-year intermediates. The money wasn't much at first, 8,000 here, 10,000 there, but she brought every rupee home and placed it on the dining table like an offering. No fanfare, just, "Here, Papa, for the next cylinder." I tried, once, to refuse. "Beta, keep something for yourself. You need." She cut me off with a look that was half her mother, half something new and fierce. "I need you to stop pretending you're made of steel. That's all I need." So I learned to accept. The electricity bill stopped hiding under holy books. The medicine strip that used to last 10 days now stretched to 20 because we could afford the full course without choosing between brands. The fan still wobbled, but we bought a new capacitor instead of waiting for it to die completely. Small victories. The kind that don't make headlines but do make mornings feel lighter. One evening in early December, she came home carrying 2 thick plastic bags. I raised an eyebrow from the sofa. More gifts. She laughed, the first real, unburdened laugh I'd heard in what felt like forever. No, groceries. And something special. She unpacked chicken, fresh coriander, green chilies, yogurt, a packet of basmati rice. Then, from the second bag, she pulled out a small, round tin of the expensive swine we used to have only on Eid when I was still working full shifts. I'm cooking tonight, she announced. No arguments. I watched her move around the tiny kitchen with a confidence she hadn't had before. The clatter of the karahi, the hiss of cumin in hot oil, the way she tasted the korma and added one more pinch of salt without hesitation, it was like watching someone step fully into their own life. We ate on the same old dining table, but the food tasted different. Not because the recipe had changed, but because for the first time in years I wasn't calculating how many meals this chicken would have to stretch. After dinner she cleared the plates herself, another new habit, and came back with 2 cups of chai. She sat across from me, legs folded under her, and looked straight into my eyes. Papa, I got the research assistant position confirmed. It starts in January, $15,000 a month, plus some extra for fieldwork. And I've applied for a part-time content writing job online. If both come through, we won't have to worry about the winter gas bills anymore. I let the words settle. They were beautiful words, dangerous words, the kind that make hope feel reckless. You don't have to do all this, I said quietly. I know, she replied. That's why I want to. She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her fingers were cool from washing dishes, but the grip was warm and sure. I used to think growing up meant getting to do whatever I wanted, she said. Now I think, maybe it means learning who you want to become for the people who carried you when you couldn't carry yourself. I felt something shift inside my chest, not pain, not exactly. More like a knot that had been tied for decades slowly loosening. That night, after she went to bed, I didn't open the Almirah. I didn't need to count the notes anymore. Instead I sat on the sofa in the dark, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator we could finally keep running without guilt, and I thought about her mother. I thought about how she used to say, Aslam, our daughter will be better than both of us combined. Just wait, I whispered into the empty room. I waited, Amna, and she's here. Outside, a light December rain began to fall, soft, patient, the kind that doesn't announce itself but soaks everything slowly, deeply. Like forgiveness, like love returned, like the long, slow journey of a father and daughter finally walking side by side instead of one always carrying the other. And for the first time in many years, the house didn't feel cold at all. January 11, 2026. The date arrived without fanfare, the way most ordinary Saturdays do in winter Islamabad. I woke before the azan, as always. The room was still dark, the heater ticking softly in the corner like an old friend who refuses to leave. I lay there a moment longer than usual, letting the day settle over me. 23 years ago today, Amna had slipped away in the same bed I still slept in. Not dramatically, not with last words or cinematic goodbyes, just a slow, gentle loosening of breath until the room grew too quiet to bear. The nurses had been kind. They let me hold her hand until it turned cool. They let me stay until the paperwork was done. They let me pretend, for a few more minutes, that she was only sleeping. Aisha had been 11 then. Too young to understand permanence, old enough to feel the hole it left. She hadn't cried in front of me for weeks afterward. She had simply become quieter, smaller, as if trying to take up less space so the missing wouldn't notice her. This morning, though, the house smelled of cardamom and frying parathay. I found her in the kitchen, sleeves rolled to her elbows, rolling dough with the same focused frown her mother used to wear. The gas flame was low, careful. On the counter sat 2 plates already prepared, one with the golden, crisp parathay, the other with a small bowl of honey and a few slices of apple, Amna's favorite breakfast on cold mornings. She didn't turn when I entered. She just said, softly, "Sit, Papa, it's almost ready." I sat. She brought the plates to the table, poured chai into the 2 cups we always used, the ones with the tiny chips on the rim, and then, without a word, placed a 3rd cup in the empty chair beside me. Empty, but not empty. The chai steamed gently, curling upward like a quiet prayer. We ate in silence for a while. The kind of silence that doesn't need filling. After the last bite, she pushed her plate away and looked at me, really looked, the way she had started doing more often these past months. I used to hate this day, she said. I would pretend it was just another Saturday. I'd go to school extra early or stay late at the library. Anything to not be here when the clock hit the same time it happened. I nodded. I had done the same, in my own way, extra overtime, unnecessary errands, anything to delay coming back to this house that suddenly had too many echoes. But this year, she continued, I wanted to be here. With you, and with her. She reached into the pocket of her sweater and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. She smoothed it on the table between us. It was a printout of an old photograph, grainy, scanned from one of the albums we hadn't opened in years. Amna laughing at something off camera, her dupatta slipping, one hand reaching to catch it. Aisha, maybe 4 years old, clinging to her leg, looking up with pure adoration. I found it when I was cleaning the Almirah last week, Aisha said. I made a copy. I thought, maybe we could keep this one out. Not hidden away. I touched the edge of the paper. My fingertip trembled, just a little. I also spoke to the administration at the graveyard, she went on. They let me renew the plot maintenance for another 5 years. Paid in full, and I ordered new marble lettering, clean, simple. Just her name, the dates, and, beloved mother, forever remembered. I couldn't speak for a long moment. When I finally did, my voice came out rough. You didn't have to, I know, she interrupted gently. But I wanted to, for her, and for you, because you've spent 23 years carrying her memory alone. I think it's time I helped carry it too. She stood, walked to the small shelf where we kept the Quran and the framed photo of Arnika. She took the old picture of Amna, faded, slightly tilted, and replaced it with the new printout. Then she adjusted it carefully, so the light from the window would fall just right. When she came back, she sat beside me instead of across. Shoulder to shoulder. I'm not trying to replace anything, she whispered. I want her to know we're both still here. And that we're okay, that we're better than okay. Outside, the winter sun had finally broken through the morning fog. A thin, pale gold light slanted across the table, catching the steam from the untouched third cup of chai. I reached over and placed my hand on top of hers. For the first time in 23 years, the silence on this day didn't feel like absence. It felt like presence, like 3 people, quietly sharing breakfast. Like a family that had learned, slowly, painfully, beautifully, how to keep loving after the one who taught them love was gone. And in that small, sunlit kitchen, on January 11, 2026, I finally understood. Grief doesn't end, but it can learn to sit beside joy. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, joy even offers it a cup of chai. January 11, 2026. The afternoon sun had already begun to slant low when we returned from the graveyard. The new marble stone caught the light just as Aisha had hoped, clean, simple, eternal. We had left fresh roses, white ones, the kind Amna used to grow in the tiny patch behind the house before the water became too scarce and the flowers too thirsty. Neither of us spoke much on the drive back. There was no need. The silence between us had changed over the months, it was no longer heavy with unsaid things. It had become the comfortable kind families earn after years of carrying each other through storms. At home, the smell of chicken karahi greeted us before we even crossed the threshold. Aisha had set the slow cooker going before we left, extra ginger, just the way I liked it, just the way Amna used to make it on cold January days like this one. We ate quietly at first. Then the stories came, small and unhurried, the way memories do when they no longer hurt to touch. Do you remember, Aisha said, tearing a piece of roti, how Mama would pretend the last piece of chicken was poisoned so you'd eat it? I laughed, a real laugh, rusty but true. And you'd believe her every time. You'd sit there glaring at the plate like it had personally offended you. She smiled into her chai. I was terrified of being the one who killed Papa. We both looked at the empty chair where the third cup still sat sometimes, now cool but never forgotten. After the plates were cleared and the kitchen tidied, Aisha brought out the old photo album, the one we hadn't opened since the funeral. She placed it on the sofa between us, opened it slowly, page by page. There we were, younger versions of ourselves, frozen in moments we had almost forgotten we owned. Amna holding newborn Aisha, both of them asleep on my shoulder. The 3 of us at the Margala picnic, wind in our hair, laughing at something lost to time. My first pension day, me in a slightly too big suit, Amna pinning a rose to my lapel, Aisha waving a tiny flag she'd made from colored paper. We didn't rush. We let each photograph breathe. When we reached the last page, a blank one, Aisha took a small envelope from her pocket. Inside was a single photograph she had printed that morning, the two of us, taken just last week outside the masjid after Juma. I'm looking at the camera, smiling the small, tired smile of a man who has finally learned to rest. Aisha is beside me, arm linked through mine, head tilted toward my shoulder. The winter sun is behind us, turning our outlines gold. She slipped the photograph into the album, closed it gently, and placed her hand over the cover. That's enough, she said softly. We don't need more pages right now. We're still writing them. I looked at her, really looked, and saw not just my daughter, but the woman who had chosen to stay, to carry, to rebuild. Beta, I said, voice steady for the first time in years, you've given me more than I ever asked for. She shook her head. No, Papa, you gave me the map. I just learned how to read it. The evening azan rose over the city, soft and familiar. We stood together at the window, watching the sky turn from pale gold to deep rose to quiet indigo. Somewhere in the distance, lights began to flicker on, small, brave points of warmth against the coming night. And in that moment, I understood the story was never really about the pension, or the trip, or even the grief. It was about the long, slow miracle of love finding its way back home. About a father who gave everything he had. About a daughter who learned, in time, to give it back. About a family that, against every odd, refused to break. The house was quiet now, but not empty. It was full, of memory, of forgiveness, of the gentle certainty that tomorrow would come, and we would meet it together. And that, after all these years, was more than enough. The end.